The Dominion fleet hung over Earth like a mechanical storm, its warships casting long shadows over the blue planet below. Inside the flagship eminence, Supreme Commander Veilrock stood before the observation deck, his arms crossed over his battle-scarred chest. The planet's lush, green jungle stretched across entire continents, an unbroken sea of untamed wilderness. Primitive, obsolete, he almost felt insulted that such a place warranted an invasion. His officers surrounded him, their polished exoskeletal armor gleaming under the sterile glow of the command center. General Kael'thon, his second-in-command, let out a dry chuckle. They actually believe they can resist us. His voice carried the weight of countless conquered worlds, each battle leaving him further convinced of the Dominion's supremacy. Veilrock exhaled through his flared nostrils. Their armies are weak, their technology outdated. And this terrain... He gestured at the sprawling jungle displayed across the hollow map. What is this if not an invitation to crush them utterly? The Dominion had fought planetary defenders who relied on towering citadels and plasma fortresses, empires with fleets that stretched across solar systems. Yet, here, Earth's military had retreated into a forest, into mud and vines. It was almost too easy. Kael'thon smirked. They rely on terrain as a crutch. They lacked the discipline to stand in open combat. He turned toward the tactical display, where dropships carrying thousands of Dominion soldiers prepared for deployment. By dusk, the jungle will be nothing more than a mass grave. Veilrock nodded. Deploy the scout divisions. I want full terrain analysis before we advance. The order sent waves through command channels, and within moments, Dominion drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, splitting the sky with burning contrails. Elite troopers touched down, their armor shifting to camouflage with the dense foliage. Bioscanners pulsed through the undergrowth, detecting movement patterns, atmospheric shifts, even minor disturbances in the soil. Yet, the jungle seemed indifferent to their presence. As the first squads advanced, Lieutenant Auras, leading one of the reconnaissance units, activated his comms. Command, scans showed no resistance in the area. No thermal signatures, no fortified positions. He swept his visor across the dense vegetation. Trees twisting toward the sky, vines hanging like grasping fingers, were proceeding forward. Their armor servo motors hummed softly as they pushed deeper into the terrain. The air was thick with humidity, coating their exosuits in a fine layer of moisture. Yet, for all their technological prowess, for all the Dominion's might, the jungle did not yield to them. Minutes passed. The eerie silence stretched. No birds, no insects. Auras clenched his jaw. Something was wrong. Maintain formation, he ordered, though an uneasy weight settled in his stomach. He had fought in the burning deserts of Xenthus, on the frozen tundras of Lurvok Prime. But this was different. A flicker of movement. Too fast for the bioscanners. Then a sharp, strangled sound. Aura spun just in time to see one of his men vanish into the underbrush, yanked down as if the jungle itself had claimed him. The Dominion soldier's armor, designed to withstand plasma fire, offered no protection against whatever had taken him. Unit 4 report. Aura's barked. Static answered. He switched channels. Command, we have... A shadow dropped from the trees. A blade flashed. Blood sprayed across the broadleaves. Auras fired wildly, his rifle's energy bolts tearing through the jungle, but there was no clear target, only movement, only death. His squad collapsed one by one, dragged into the darkness between the trees. By the time Command received his garbled, breathless transmission, Auras was already gone. Back aboard the Eminence, Kael'thon narrowed his eyes at the transmission log. Contact lost. Multiple squads, the comms officer reported, his tone laced with confusion. No confirmed visuals on hostiles. No survivors. Veilrock's expression darkened. Kael'thon scoffed. Perhaps they encountered local wildlife. Primitive life forms can be unpredictable. Yet, even as he said it, doubt flickered in his eyes. The Dominion did not lose soldiers to wildlife. Somewhere in the jungle below, unseen and waiting, Earth's special forces listened to the fading echoes of the aliens' transmissions. Captain Elias Grant adjusted his earpiece, his face illuminated by the dim glow of his squad's equipment. His voice was quiet, yet certain. They think the jungle is their enemy. His lips curled into a smirk. Let's show them how right they are. The jungle breathed around them. Damp earth, thick, humid air, the steady drip of moisture from twisted canopies above. Every leaf, every vine, every shadow conspired to swallow sound, to shroud movement. It was a perfect hunting ground. It was theirs. Captain Elias Grant crouched behind a wall of ferns, motionless. His skin, streaked with mud and sweat, blended seamlessly into the undergrowth. He didn't need to look to know his men were positioned just as still, just as patient. The jungle was their ally. The jungle was their weapon. Through the dense foliage, the alien patrol advanced. 10 of them, armored, disciplined, cautious. They moved in a stagger formation, rifles sweeping side to side, scanning for threats. Their visors flickered with shifting data, attempting to pierce the shadows. The Dominion was learning, slowly, not fast enough. Elias gave a sharp, silent gesture, a barely perceptible click. The first explosion was subtle, just a shifting of earth, a soft, deceptive pull beneath the lead soldier's foot. Then the ground collapsed. The alien plunged down, vanishing into the pit lined with jagged stakes. His scream was short, wet. The squad froze. A second too long. A silence round punched through a helmet. The soldier dropped without a sound. Panic rippled through the unit, weapons snapping in every direction. But the jungle was still, empty, only the whisper of wind through the leaves. Then came the second strike. A vine-covered branch snapped downward, a camouflage counterweight yanking another alien skyward, his limbs flailing before serrated blades silenced him. His squad mates fired wildly, muzzle flashes stuttering through the dark. Their shots found nothing but trees, empty air. "Fall back!" one of them barked in their guttural tongue. Elias didn't speak their language, but he understood desperation well enough. A soldier turned, sprinting for safety. He made it 3 steps before a tripwire caught his ankle. A weighted log, sharpened to a wicked point, swung from the canopy. The impact crushed him instantly. Another fell to a wire-strung knife, triggered from the undergrowth. The last 2 survivors bolted, abandoning formation, abandoning orders. Fear had broken them. Elias let them run. He let them think, for the briefest moment, that they might escape. Then the jungle itself ended them. The underbrush came alive with gunfire, short, precise bursts. The soldiers jerked, armor sparking, then fell into the wet soil. Silence returned. Elias exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. His men emerged like ghosts from the foliage, retrieving spent rounds, resetting traps. Every action was deliberate, every motion rehearsed 1,000 times. They left no bodies, no weapons, nothing for the enemy to study. The Dominion would search for their missing men. They would find nothing but empty jungle. Elias tapped his earpiece. Squad 3 report. A soft chuckle crackled over the line. "Same story here," came Lieutenant Mason's voice, low and amused. "They walk in. They don't walk out." "Good." Elias surveyed the jungle, his mind already calculating the next assault. The Dominion would adapt. They were too disciplined, too experienced to fall for the same tactics forever. But that didn't matter. The jungle was vast, and they had time. Hours later, Dominion Command received another garbled distress signal. Another patrol lost. No bodies. No survivors. No explanation. Commander Veilrock stood rigid, watching the data scroll across the holoscreen. The casualty reports were stacking, not from direct engagements, not from organized resistance, from something else. "This is impossible," General Kael'thun growled. "How are they doing this?" Veilrock's jaw tightened. He had underestimated Earth. That much was clear. Deploy aerial drones. Scan the entire jungle. Kael'thun relayed the order. Within minutes, Dominion drones, sleek, Predator machines armed with infrared and motion tracking, swept over the jungle canopy, hunting for the enemy. They found nothing, not because there was nothing to find, because Elias and his men had already moved. The drones glided overhead, scanning with mechanical precision. Below, buried beneath the jungle's thickest brush, The special forces waited in absolute silence. Not a breath, not a twitch, faces pressed into damp earth, bodies motionless. They had trained for this, against superior technology, against hunters who relied on sensors instead of instincts. The drones passed. Elias waited another 10 minutes before moving, just to be sure. His earpiece buzzed again. "They're sending in the mechs," Mason murmured. "Big ones." So, the Dominion was done playing. Elias smirked. Let them. The Dominion's assault mech was a towering beast of reinforced plating and hydraulic muscle. It crashed through the jungle with brutal efficiency, crushing trees beneath its massive feet. Its rotary cannon spun in readiness, its infrared sensors scanning, hunting. It didn't hunt long. It found what it was looking for. A single human figure, standing in the clearing, holding a rifle loosely at his side. The mech's targeting system locked on instantly. No warning, no hesitation. The cannons roared. A storm of bullets shredded the air where the man had stood. But he was gone. A blur of motion. A retreating shadow. The mech followed. It had no fear. No doubt. Only programming. Only orders. It never saw the ledge. One moment, solid ground. The next, empty space. The jungle collapsed beneath it. It fell, slamming into the pit below, an old sinkhole, reinforced with explosives. The charges detonated in a blinding fireball. A shockwave rippled through the trees, sending a column of flame roaring skyward. When the smoke cleared, the mech was nothing but wreckage. Elias watched from the tree-line, arms crossed. A good kill, but they would send more. They always did. That was fine. The jungle had room for all of them. Panic was spreading through the Dominion ranks. It started as quiet murmurs, reports of patrols disappearing, equipment failing, shadows moving where nothing should be. Then the whispers turned to shouts. Entire units lost. Elite soldiers vanishing without a trace. The jungle was consuming them. Supreme Commander Veil Rock's fists curled as he studied the latest reports. His forces were dwindling, not in great, glorious battles, but in the suffocating silence an enemy they could not see. His soldiers were trained for planetary conquest, for war waged with superior firepower and overwhelming might. They were not trained for this. "This is madness," General Kael'thon muttered beside him. His once confident tone was fraying, his reptilian eyes darting over the casualty reports as though searching for a mistake. There was none. Veil Rock's jaw tightened. The jungle was supposed to be nothing more than an obstacle, an inconvenience. He had scoffed at its primitive nature. Now it had become a black hole, swallowing his forces one by one. "Deploy all remaining units," he ordered. "Scorched Earth Protocol. Burn this place to ash." Kael'thon hesitated. "If we do that, we risk—" "We risk nothing," Veil Rock snapped. "They will not hide from fire." The order was given. Flamethrowers roared, streaking lines of fire through the undergrowth. Trees burned. Smoke twisted upward, thick and choking. The jungle, so alive, so untamed, recoiled under the assault. For the first time, the Dominion had struck back. And for the first time, Elias Grant allowed himself a grin. From his position deep in the brush, he watched the enemy move. The fire was their weapon, their desperate attempt to reclaim control. But fire did not simply burn away cover. It created light, revealed shapes, outlined movement. And that was a mistake. Elias tapped his earpiece. "Squads, hold positions. They're giving us a shooting gallery." The Dominion forces advanced, confident, believing they had finally flushed out their ghosts. Their flamethrowers hissed. Their helmets turned from side to side, scanning the charred ruins for the enemy. They never thought to look above. From the blackened canopy, ropes dropped silently. Figures descended like wraiths, knives flashing in the firelight. Throats slit, rifles stolen mid-scream. Bodies crumpled before their squad mates even noticed. Then, from the jungle beyond the fire, came the gunfire. Short bursts, controlled, deadly. The aliens turned to face it. But by then, the soldiers in their midst had already been taken. Confusion spiraled into chaos. The once disciplined formation became a panic swarm. Veil Rock listened to the reports, his fists tightening with each new transmission. The jungle still lived. Even burned, even smoldering, it had turned against them. They are not warriors, he growled. They are hunters. A deep, uneasy silence settled over the command room. For the first time, Kael'thun did not argue. Down below, Elias watched the retreat begin. It was not an organized withdrawal. It was not a strategic repositioning. It was fear. The mighty Dominion, the empire that had raised worlds and enslaved entire species, was running. His rifle rested loosely in his grip. He could have ordered his men to pursue, to cut them down as they fled. But that was not the mission. The goal was never to destroy the Dominion. It was to teach them, to make them remember. He stepped forward, just enough for one of the retreating soldiers to see him. The alien froze, his weapon half raised, his body trembling. Elias met his gaze and said nothing. He didn't need to. The soldier turned and ran. Elias exhaled slowly, his smirk returning. Let them run. Let them carry the story of what had happened here, of what Earth was. They would not return. The Dominion fleet abandoned orbit in silence. No final transmission, no threats of revenge. Only the cold retreat of warships that had once cast their shadows over the world below. Fires still smoldered in the jungle. Thin trails of smoke winding toward the sky like the last breaths of a battle that had long since been decided. Elias Grant stood at the edge of the tree-line, watching the enemy disappear into the void. Their once proud forces had been reduced to scattered survivors, fleeing from a world they had expected to conquer. The jungle, now quiet in its victory, had swallowed the dead, leaving only ghosts and the memories of those who had fought. His earpiece crackled. Confirmed, Mason's voice came through. They're gone. Elias exhaled. It was over. Behind him, his men emerged from the undergrowth, moving without urgency, their weapons lowered. They had fought not for medals or parades, not for history books or recognition. They had fought because no one else could, because Earth's survival had never depended on massive fleets or towering fortresses. It had depended on men like them. Mason approached, his usual grin subdued but present. You think they'll be back? Elias considered the question. The Dominion was vast, an empire built on dominance, on never accepting defeat. But this war had not been fought on their terms. They had not lost to superior numbers or overwhelming firepower. They had lost to something they did not understand. He shook his head. Not here. Not again. Mason smirked. Hell of a thing, huh? A bunch of grunts, sending an empire packing. Elias said nothing, only watching as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The jungle, wounded but unbeaten, stood resilient against the rising sun. Far beyond Earth, on Dominion homeworlds and military outposts, the news would spread. There would be whispers in command halls, uneasy discussions among high-ranking officers. A simple truth, undeniable and terrifying, would take root. Earth was not to be touched. The Dominion had mocked its wilderness, its untamed lands. But when they had stepped inside, when they had tried to conquer it, the wilderness had fought back, and it had won.